Welcome, everyone, to another presentation of the EWA podcast. I am your host, Craig, and this week we are upping the ante, pushing the Hash Pipe Report to be better than it is by having a video guest on as well. Joining me this week, it's kind of a melancholy week. We had planned this for a while, and we were both hopeful that we would come out of Civil War both victorious, but I guess I was the only one man enough to get that job done. But joining me after his world title reign coming to an end, Brett, welcome to the EWA video podcast, I guess.
I'm happy to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Craig.
Yeah, little bit of lag on my part here, but I think we'll get it figured out. I think you were on the very first podcast, and during that, your wife, then girlfriend, was downloading stuff on LimeWire, so you might want to go in there and make sure she's not downloading more stuff on LimeWire, Brett.
She might be streaming something on Netflix. Is that going to be a problem, you think?
Well, it's a little frozen right now. I think we'll get it figured out as time goes on. But regardless, thank you for coming on EWA podcast number 1, and I believe number 4, and then like number 9 or something else. But this is the first time you've been on in a long time, and now you're here. It's been too long. We keep in touch via text. And we talk fairly often throughout the week, mostly about wrestling and EWA stuff, but we've never actually sat down to do a podcast for a long time. Feels good.
Yeah, I've been begging you for a while, and you keep saying you have more important guests.
I've got better guests. Don't tell Cleve this is happening, or it could get ugly.
When you really run out of guesses, when Cleve will be on, right?
Yeah, that's the bottom of the barrel, yeah. But no, it kind of feels weird to just kind of come on and like host this podcast and be like, hey, I just won like this crazy highly competitive Civil War. Now watch me talk to the guy who used to be the champion as we wear matching T-shirts, but
I'm just trying to keep you humble. I mean,
it's tough.
I need to show you the other side of success. You may climb to the top, but you'll fall to the bottom, just like me. So.
Yep. Well, I hope not, but we'll see what happens. No, right. Brett has been a mainstay in the EWA for just a few months longer than I've been around the EWA. So Brett and I kind of cut our teeth together in the EWA. He had a measure of success before I got there, and he's someone that I talked to in our early days of Val Venus and Cody Rhodes. Val Venus, probably what you're most known for, but people here recently would probably say that Ken Shamrock is what you're most known for. What would you consider yourself to be more well known for?
Well, I think it depends on who you talk to. I mean, I did over 150 role plays as Val Venus, and had quite a long run with him. But then there was a pretty big gap between that and when I joined up as Ken Shamrock, and I was looking at my Google Drive, and it's hard to believe I've only done 30 role plays as Ken Shamrock, and I've had as much success as I've had. And there's sort of a whole generation of folks that only know me as Ken Shamrock, so yeah, I mean, I think I'm getting to that point now where I may be known, more for Ken just because of the most recent stuff, but I don't want to forget all the work I did with Val Venus in the past. So.
Yeah, and of course we have a litany of other characters that you've portrayed, in and out with different characters, but you've found your most measure of success with Shamrock and Val Venus in the past. What would you say a character like Ken Shamrock and your characters like Ken Shamrock and Val Venus have in common?
I seem to have this niche that I don't know if I've put myself into this sort of corner or if it's just what's worked for me, but sort of the grizzled veteran, on the tail end of his career type story. I've done that pretty well. With Val Venus, I had a long run with him, but that's a character I had used for, going back to when I started in EFEDS 20 years ago. And so I had this kind of interesting approach where I could, portray him as this veteran guy because I had played the character for so long, even though only since 2012 in the EWA. And then with Shamrock too, you just have, I find it really easy to tell stories when you have characters that have like a lot of backstory or just time in their life that you can portray. You just have more, to pull from. A guy who's in his 20s, it's harder because he just hasn't lived life as much to be able to tell a story. So yeah. So I think that's what's the big thing in common with them is just sort of their age and their experience in wrestling. So
how did applying and joining and portraying the Ken Shamrock character come to be?
That's a good question. I'm not shared this with many people, but I had a pretty decent run with you and Cleve as part of the House of H. But I never really, as Killian Dane, but I never really established that character as anything more than just part of the team. And I did some work of giving him some backstory, but he never really was meant to be a singles competitor. And I think after our second title reign with the House of H, and then eventually Super Brawl kind of came and went. I took a bit of a break,
Mm-hmm.
and funny enough, like I just went on the boards one day and there was a message from Newt, and he just said, I think the body of the message said something like, "What do you think about Ken Shamrock?" And I said, well, I'd never really thought about it, and he just. I think the thing he said is like maybe you could do one of your deep character dives for a guy like Ken Shamrock. And he said, I'm not promising anything, but I think this could eventually lead to a good feud with someone like Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
And so, I honestly had no plans to join a Shamrock, but when Newt kind of gave me that idea, I just started thinking about it, and next thing I knew, I realized it was something I could make it work. So, I mean, it was interesting. That's the first time someone had approached me and said, "Hey, will you join as this character?" And so I was glad I did it. So thanks to Newt for the tip.
Yeah. And then you spent the majority of your fall kind of feuding in and out with Trevor Mann, controlled by Jared.
Yeah.
Talk about your time in that feud and how basically intense that feud was towards the end.
It's funny how that happened, because I never like set out to feud with Trevor Mann, with Jared. I really enjoyed his work when he came in, and he was relatively new. Honestly, when I joined the Shamrock, one of my goals was just to like hand pick a couple contenders, kind of working my way up the ladder, and kind of who I was going to break in the character with was against Bobby Lashley, and it just happened to be that Trevor Mann sort of slotted into that feud at the same time. And it wasn't intentional, but coming out of that triple threat match with Bobby Lashley and Trevor Mann, it actually ended up being made more sense for Shamrock and Mann to face off. So we did that, and it got pretty intense. I mean, he pushed me to get serious about the character a lot sooner than I think I was ready to. And he beat me early on in the feud, and it kind of pushed me to kind of dig deep and write better than I did before, and bring the character to a level that it wasn't necessarily ready for. And honestly, like I don't think I would have made it to Super Brawl as a captain had I not had that feud, without a doubt.
And then so you pick up the victory over Trevor Mann. You move into Super Brawl season. It's not your first rodeo and being a captain of the team, and it is actually your second victory as Super Brawl captain. Talk about the Super Brawl experience of leading a team and then coming out victorious.
Well, I captained back-to-back years in 2012 and 2013. One coming in as the underdog, and then the second year defending my title, which was hard with Val Venus. So I had and I'd participated in a couple Super Brawls since then. But I came into 2014 kind of with 2018 with this idea that I wanted to be a captain, but if I wanted to be a captain, it was going to be all about picking the right players for my team. And so I lucked out to get good people, and I knew that like it almost didn't matter what characters I picked as long as I picked people that I knew could execute the story. And so that's why I drafted you and John, and that's why I drafted Brady and Skinner, and so I kind of knew what to do. Like I'd had a game plan of like I know what's successful, I know what'll win a Super Brawl match. I didn't think it was by any means like a sure thing, but I knew that if I went in there with the right people, we could pull it off. So
how did you feel after the role plays were posted about your chances on leading the team to victory?
I felt good. I felt like Lou's team was really strong, and I kind of felt that they could have beat us. And I don't know what the final decision. I never asked Newt like what made him make the final decision, but I felt like it was us, or we were in the running. It was either us or Lou's team. Not to dismiss what the other two teams did, but I thought that it was kind of down to our two. And so I felt good about it. I felt like we put the good work together, and I was going to be happy regardless of what happened. But I can't say I wasn't thrilled to win. So
right.
Yeah.
But then you had the task of coming out of Super Bowl as the world champion. Then and taking on the King of the Ring, PCO. And, of course, that feud kind of just culminated this last weekend in Civil War. Talk about your experience working with Lou and the character that is PCO.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've shared this with you in some texts with you and Cleve that, it scared the shit out of me to wrestle against that character. Not because I didn't think I was capable of writing against it, but it was just so different from what I'd spent the last 6 months doing. I had been in a very reality-based feud with Brock Lesnar, and the most out there thing we had done is that I had the high heel of Sable stabbed into my eye, into Shamrock's eye. That was like the weirdest thing that happened in that whole feud. To then turn around and feud against someone like PCO, where it's this whole supernatural element, it kind of threw me. And I have to say, like, I was kind of surprised when he didn't get a decisive win over me at Collision Course. But coming out of that, even though I retained the title, I knew I needed to kind of step my game up. And so I kind of dove in head first into making the feud work for Ken Shamrock. And honestly, it was really fun to work with Lou and the PCO character. But yeah. So to say it was a challenge is an understatement. I don't want to dismiss the victory that Lou had, but I don't know that I was ready for that type of feud in terms of like storytelling for Ken Shamrock. He just wasn't at a place where it made a whole lot of sense to, dive into the supernatural, if that makes sense.
Let me ask you this, and I hope I'm not diving into your penis and your anus, but this is something that you and I have kind of touched on in the past. Would you say that being the world champion is like the least favorable position in the EWA? Like it's it's tough, and I don't know if it's a curse of being at the top, but I personally always do well when I've got something to strive for in terms of holding on, like going for a title, trying to like achieve something. And so when you're already at the top and you've achieved it, it's really hard to maintain it. I think that speaks really strongly to like a guy like Key and what he did with Brock Lesnar over the last couple of years, because he was able to just always perform at that high level. It's weird because when you become the world champ, you almost have this like sense that like you shouldn't take matches very often. Yeah.
For me, like I have to take matches on a regular basis to keep the writing fresh.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I spend the first 1.5 role plays like remembering how to write my character whenever I have a match.
Yeah.
And so I think it's not necessarily that like being at the top is a hard thing, but it's just when you're in that position, you don't necessarily, it's almost like you're saving all of your appearances and your matches for big matches, and you're focused a lot on segments and pushing the storyline along and being that showcase feud that, it's not often you see the world champ just come and like take an open challenge from some guy that joined, 2 weeks before, picking up a random match on Slam. And so for me, it hurts because I don't have as much. I almost feel rusty by the time it comes to a title match. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it kind of is like too, where you don't really have a choice with the storyline because you're just like, we're fighting for the belt. Like there's no real, like you guys might hate each other, but it's still like the championship is what's on the line. Whereas with other feuds, it can very much just be like this passion and emotionally driven feud between two people that makes the writing and story come easier.
I had something to prove when I was, shooting for the, to contend for the title, and when you get it, you've already proven that you're the best, and you have to find a new way to challenge yourself. But yeah, you're right. It's, I don't want to say like your feuds are decided for you, because it's never like that. Like Newt has always been very flexible with like the direction, but there is an expectation that you're going to face a certain character, or you're going to continue a feud in a certain way, or you're going to defend the title at each pay-per-view. And so, yeah, it's hard. You don't get nearly as much freedom when you're the champion to just kind of decide what to do as someone who's out there, kind of cutting their own path, So
yeah,
I'd almost rather be the Civil War winner, where I could use that as a feather in my cap and then do whatever I want after that. So
it's easy to, like, the easiest story to tell is one of the underdog trying to overcome everything and like rise to the top. But when you're on the top, to be like, I'm on top, and now I have to fend off everyone else trying to play the underdog. Like it's a real
Yeah.
testament to those who can have long title reigns to just be
I
like, I'm the
told,
best.
I told myself when I got the title, I said if I make it to 100 days, I'll be happy, and I made it to 105. So
Hey, all
I
right, five days of happiness.
yeah. So and it was longer than both my reigns with Val Venus as world champ. Yeah, that's the thing. Like I don't. I'm fine. Like I'd almost rather be a multi-time champ that wins a couple times and then loses than try to hold on to it for forever because I think the title changing hand in a more competitive division is better for the Fed than like one guy that just dominates all the time. So
What was your feeling going before reading the results of Civil War? What was your feeling heading into that match with Lou after reading
um,
his stuff?
after the role plays have been posted,
Yeah.
I knew he'd won. Like I knew after his first role play he'd won, and I had a story to tell with kind of finishing this journey with Tanya Shamrock and Ken Shamrock of the essentially collapse of their marriage. I and this is something that is going to continue in terms of Ken's evolution as a character, and I needed to tell that story then because it just didn't make any sense for him for Tanya to just like suddenly be okay that she'd been returned home after like 2 months of being tortured by James Mitchell.
Yeah.
And so I had a story to tell and kind of an idea, and I knew it was an approach that could result in me losing the match because I don't think I talked about PCO a single time in any of my 3 role plays.
Yeah, except
Uh,
for like, he had you then.
yeah, and I think Ken Shamrock probably had like 10 sentences in the whole set.
Yeah.
Like it was a very story driven set. Not to say that PCO's was any different. I mean, he definitely had Lou had a story to tell too, but um, you know, credit to Lou, like this whole feud has been built to really tell his story really well. And I was just glad to be able to kind of get in there and tell my story with Ken Shamrock in a way that made sense. But I'm not at all, upset that he won the match.
Yeah.
But I had a sense after he posted his first 1 or 2 role plays that that he's probably going to walk away with the title. But and that didn't stop me. I still had a story to tell, and I put out the effort because I wanted to try to win. So.
What are your thoughts on Brock Lesnar being involved in the finish of that match?
I don't know if I've got an opinion about that yet. I like Key a lot. He's a really talented writer, and as quiet as he is on the out of character stuff, he's fairly easy to work with. I think it was inevitable he's going to come back at some point. And I think the comment I made is I was glad he came back for our match and he didn't come back for the Civil War match because I think he would have stolen the thunder of that match more if he had come as a surprise entrant. And so I wasn't, storyline wise, it made sense. Like he wasn't done with, I broke his ankle at Super Brawl. Ken Shamrock did. So he's going to come back for revenge. And I look forward to how he inserts himself into the scene. As you guys will probably see on Slam, I'm not done with feuding with PCO as far as I'm concerned. And I think that we may be working towards a match with all 3 of us. Maybe. I don't know. We're kind of in the planning stages there. But yeah, it'll be fun to add that element because I almost am more excited about that because Ken Shamrock then has another like thread of this story that is almost more personal than what he dealt with PCO, So it'll add in another layer to this feud that just makes it an easier story to tell for all 3 of us.
That's nice that you guys are going to do like a potential 3-way thing, and I mean somebody just fucking won Civil War, so I guess that doesn't.
you got all year to sit
Really?
on that.
I think last time I won Civil War with Cody Rhodes, I sat on it all year and then had some
I was young,
bad shit.
Dan.
I know I had some bad shit happen to me in the later year and had to wind up basically.
The slam before Super Brawl.
I wasn't even around the Fed at that time.
And I was like, is Craig back?
No, just back to get squashed by Lesnar, but that's a different story for a different time. Let's talk about how long you and I have been in the EWA. I think we got our start almost, man, what was it? Like 10?
I joined in January of 2012.
Yeah, I was going to say 8 years, so 7 years ago.
Yeah.
How would you say things are different now in the EWA than they were 7 years ago whenever you joined?
People are a lot fucking nicer than they used to be.
Yeah.
People were just assholes across the board. We had some
Yeah.
people in the early days that there was a lot of drama and politics and certain people wouldn't work with each other and all that shit that just I think as we've all aged has gotten to be less acceptable. I'd say it's hard because I've had my times where I've barely been involved with the EWA, and I've had my times where I've really been involved. But I'd say that we have a core group of guys now that are more dedicated to telling stories.
Yeah.
Whereas in 2012, 2013, there were people more dedicated to winning matches. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
People wanted to have a win-loss record that was high, and if they lost too many matches, they quit or they change characters. And I'm also impressed with the ability for people now to handle like 3 or 4 or 5 characters at once.
Right.
It wasn't like that before,
Yeah.
We all just have have a lot less of a life, and so we have more free time, or if we're just that more efficient at writing now.
Yeah, I think it's all become like second nature to us. I like the fact that after all this time, like we can still sit down and have a feud with like John or each other or guys like that have been around, but we can also like do these things with Cuz and Jared and just kind of like seamlessly transition into feuding with these newer guys too. But do you feel a sense of I don't want to say an old boys club because obviously I've talked about the newer guys with that, but do you feel a sense of like sometimes with the position that we're in, like sometimes the newer guys have to prove themselves before like we'll even give them a shot or think about like feuding with them?
That's a good question. I was in an interesting position this last year because I brought Shamrock in as a new character, and I hadn't had a singles run in a long time. And so I think, in some ways, some of those new guys probably didn't even know that I'd been around as long as I had been.
Yeah.
And so, and I've always been kind of quiet on the boards. I'm not one to make a ton of comments and to participate a lot. Not to say that that's a bad thing. That's just not my personality. I don't know. I don't think that it's as bad as it used to be. If anything, someone that joins today might look and see at the level of talent that's out there from anybody, even folks that have been around for 6 months to a year, and that's what's intimidating. It's not necessarily that someone's been around for a long time, but that you're going to take a match on a random slam and get your ass kicked by because he's just awesome, or Josh is going to break out some awesome role play as Finley and just bulldoze you because you're a brand new role player and you came in and happened to get caught against a guy that writes really well. So no, I don't think there's an old boys club because none of us have been making that effort to like hold people back.
Not like it used to be, because there definitely was that before.
Yeah, there was that before. I mean, I'm not going to name names, but I think when I first joined, I was like warned not to try to fight certain people, and I just didn't give a shit and fought them anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what Newt appreciated the most about you early on. Newt is someone for you and I who has been easy to work with. I would say I don't know the level of communication that other people have with Newt and if they talk to him a lot, but I don't really. I think I had like 2 messages to him in the last 3 months. So
yeah, we with the new setup on the board.
Yeah, that helps out too. Yeah, with the multiple message.
People.
Yeah.
He may be tired of it, but he's been included on every message from Lou and I, and so. Usually it's him chiming in with some sort of feedback about what we're creating, and that's been nice. Like that wasn't always like that. I did feel in years past that unless you went out of your way to like give Newt a rundown of what you were planning to do in a separate message, he just wasn't really in the loop until you sent the segment in. Mm-hmm. So I think the logistics of the board now have allowed us to communicate better. Yeah, I think he's got an open door policy. I don't think the guy he's not gonna like just ignore your message. But I also really appreciate that he's not the type of guy who's gonna like impose his will on every single one of your feuds or storylines. Yeah.
So he didn't recommend maybe like killing off Frank Shamrock and putting his soul into like a plastic flamingo or anything.
I think we know where that ended up. So
I mean, I know he's not on here, but we've talked personally about like just how Cleve has just rolled with the punches on something like that, and that's really like you can only get away with that in a format like the EWA. But
right.
you know,
Like we've said, I think Cleve might be like low key the best role player in the Fed,
yeah,
because the guy can literally write a top caliber story with the Big Show with the soul of a pink flamingo inside of it. So
yeah. Uh,
it's weird. So
that of course has the supernatural element. PCO has had his fair share of supernatural elements in his story as well. You and I have dabbled in some
yes.
supernatural elements in the past. How do you think the world and stories of the supernatural fit into the realm of the EWA as a whole?
I think it's I thought about that, you go back a number of years and think about when like the Marvel Cinematic Universe started, and this whole idea of like blockbuster movies being superhero movies and having that supernatural element and superheroes and aliens and all that. Like when Iron Man first came out, that was considered, kind of a different thing. People didn't take it seriously. I think the same thing goes in some ways for the EWA. Like we treated it like a serious wrestling company for a long time, but as we've evolved and become better writers and learned how to walk that tightrope of like the super realistic and the supernatural, we found ways to tell these stories that don't necessarily jump the shark, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
It also helps that wrestling as a whole has embraced that kind of storytelling, more like superhero movies and supernatural stuff are more popular now than it ever has been. And you see things like Lucha Underground, and you see things like the Final Deletion and other things within wrestling that are embracing this sort of stuff without losing the realistic element, and it fits better than it did before. So I think it'd be different if you had a guy join and said like, I'm going to shoot fireballs at you, and that's how I'm going to win my match every week, or I'm going to, turn into the Incredible Hulk and smash you. But the idea is like the supernatural elements more tie into the storytelling than they do to the actual moves that the guy does in the ring. You know.
yeah. I
So
think I think that's what.
like when PCO gets in the ring, like he doesn't behave differently than like a big lumbering,
Yeah,
beast of a wrestler.
yeah.
He's not doing something out of the ordinary that a guy of his size wouldn't do anyway.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think it's a testament to Lou and what he managed to do. And, obviously I read a bunch of role plays last week, and his just like, it read like a movie script without, like, the line details in it. Like, it was just, I don't know. It just felt like more than just, like, a role play. It was just, like, the story that he had told. And, like, to fit it into the realm of this realistic world that we've created, it's just it was really good. It would have been tough for anyone to beat him in that situation. So, not an
Yeah.
envious spot for you.
And to me, it's never really been about winning and losing. Like, so I was really happy to see him tell that story. I would have hated to him have to compromise the story he was telling to try to beat me in a certain way. So I'm glad that he was able to tell his story he did, and same on my end. And I wasn't, gonna lose sleep at night if I lost the title, because I knew, I would have more fun, if the outcome of the match made sense, to then continue that story or to move on to my next story, than if I was trying to force something to happen just to hold on to a stupid belt. So
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, Marty Skrull picking up the victory in the Civil War match, something I
mhm.
had been building up to for a while. Very happy to get that victory. You
Yep.
have a Civil War victory to your credit as well. You did it with Val Venus with a surprise return with secret role plays. Let's talk
Yes.
about that for a second. Did you feel bad at all about the people who had been building a story up to that Civil War match at that point to come back and kind of secretly win the way you did, or is that just kind of the name of the
It,
game sometimes?
I mean, honestly, I didn't feel bad because I had come within like 6 inches of winning the Civil War the year before. So in my debut Civil War, I was national champion. I defended the national title, did 3 role plays, and then 3 more role plays for the Civil War match. Which, yeah, I know it's not as many as you did, but But
Yeah.
and then I lost. I think it was Steve Carino. I think it was me and him the last two of the 2012 Civil War, and we both went over the rope at the same time, and I just barely Val just barely touched the ground before he did,
Yeah.
and so I had then gone on to win at Super Brawl and then lost the title before the next Civil War, and so I felt a little bit of like it was a chance for redemption, and it made sense for my character because I had built up this underdog persona with him, and I had kind of written him off as being injured, and it was just a fun way to kind of hit the reset button and to bring and inject some new life into the character. Um, I'd say my biggest regret is that I then went and turned Valvina's heel later that year, which I don't know that was my smartest thing in the world
Yeah.
that I've ever done. But I didn't feel bad about the way I won Civil War because the quality of the work was good. I felt like I wrote role plays that were worthy of winning. So, um, but yeah, I mean, I think that's at the end of the day, it's not like you're going to write a role play for Civil War where you're responding to what the other guy's saying. You're just going to tell your story, and that's how you win.
It makes it a very unique situation to where you
Yeah.
are literally like just telling a story across this, because you and I are very much in the same vein where it's like in the matches where you're up against someone or someone's in particular, like there's a little bit of shit talking element to it, whereas with the Civil War you're against everyone, so you can't really shit talk everyone. You can.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go paragraph by paragraph. And
Yeah.
here's my 28th paragraph in which I shit talk Kofi Kingston.
Yeah, like Mordecai, he did it that one year, like in alphabetical order, or like did it with like a poem or something.
Yeah.
You remember Mordecai? That was
I do.
somebody we knew, but we don't know who it was. But whoever Mordecai was, if you're out there listening, John, Dylan, Ed, somebody like that, that was okay. But you did some weird stuff to Scott Stanford that is unspeakable, and we shouldn't.
Yeah.
We shouldn't ever bring up.
I'll say that was not as good of a pull off of the supernatural as it got.
Yeah.
People got playing the supernatural characters since then. So.
We have seen our fair share of comers and goers.
Wow.
Guys that have come in. I could throw some names out there that would probably instantaneously trigger stuff for you from from Franklin Lashley before he was Bobby Lashley to Crimson. Came in and kind of tore the Fed up for a while before just disappearing. But it's nice to know that there's always been the mainstays of guys like us. Aside from your main characters like Val and Ken Shamrock, you've had some other side characters. Who are some guys that never really got off the ground that you were hoping would, or a character that you wanted to play but just haven't played yet?
Yeah. So I thought about that when I was thinking about this podcast that stuff may come up. I had a very short run as Sami Zayn.
Yeah, that's right.
And just I think I liked his character in the WWE, and I said, oh, it'd be fun to role play as him, and then I realized like, okay, but I don't know who he is, or I don't have a voice, and so that was short lived. I had probably 10 role plays as him, a couple of matches. I probably lost more than I won. You and I had a pro tag team. I think we joined as Dean Malenko and Dean Ambrose, right? The Deans.
Yeah, the Deans. Yeah.
And somehow,
hired hitmen.
Yes. And this is Dean Ambrose, but I think before he even debuted in the WWE. This is like pre-Shield Dean Ambrose.
Yep.
And I didn't even know how to play the guy. I just was like, oh, his name's Dean, that'll work,
Yeah.
And so we did that for a while.
We paralyzed Dean Malenko.
Paralyzed Dean Malenko.
Because Cleve the other day was like, what about Dean Malenko? And we're like, well, we kind of put him in a wheelchair in our run, so I don't know if that's such a good idea.
Well, I told you, I think you need to shave his head and bring him back as a Professor X style mutant with Cerebra.
There was the Ding Dongs. The Ding Dongs paralyzed Dean Malenko. I didn't like. New probably actually does really hate us. You guys are doing what to Dean Malenko? Don't worry about it, man.
Yeah, I don't think we ever won a match after that.
Well, I brought in Wade Barrett for the tag team after that, and then we did some like weird lost shit We're like we never talked about our opponents, and we're just like the smoke monster, and like we had us like strapped to chairs down in like the secret lab, and we had number tattoos on us and weird shit. Like we were out there, man.
I don't think we even had a plan. I think we were just making it up as we went along.
We had a sheet in Google Drive that was like just a way for us to keep our shit straight. That we're like, oh wait, okay, yeah, this guy is actually this guy's dad, so let's not use him in this way. And then yeah, we thought what we were doing was great, and then like
no one read that shit.
Yeah, well, then Newt probably just hated it because we were in like a fatal 4-way tag match, and we were like the first ones out, and we were like, oh okay, this actually sucks. Let's not do this anymore.
Yeah. So did that. I think the character I played that I have the most, the big what if would be, I had a really short run, and I didn't tell many people I joined as this, but I was Bob Holly for a short time.
Yeah.
Gosh, it was about a year ago.
Yeah.
And I brought Bob Holly in and
before the House of H stuff.
Before the House of H stuff, yeah. And I told this story with Bob Holly with him losing his wife and having to come back to wrestling because his was the only thing he had after his wife had died, and I really enjoyed it. Like I was telling a good story with that. I had read a couple books. Part of it, I read part of his memoir, but also have been reading a lot about just like the life of people that live in like rural Appalachian America in the 21st century, and just sort of like the culture of folks that live in West Virginia and the Deep South and things like that. And so I just was like wanting to tell a story kind of about those types of people. And I remember sort of building in my head this like all these side characters that were the people that lived in the town that he was in, and the folks he interacted with, and then I think I just didn't have time, and I lost a couple matches and ran out of ideas, and then my life got in the way, and I just stopped playing it. But I always think about that. Like I had fun kind of formulating that story, and some of the stuff I created for Bob Holly actually ended up getting used for Ken Shamrock. So I was able to kind of repurpose some of those ideas. So
yeah, I think that was right around the time where I joined up at Civil War with Rusev, who do you remember that, where he was living with Hillbilly Jim? Like Hillbilly Jim like took him in under his arm and was like he was like a farmhand and stuff, and
yeah.
I was in like the Final Four of Civil War that year with my debut stuff, and that was fun. Like, but that was
like a period of time in the EWA where like some of the old timers like us just sort of like fell off the map. And it was some like this weird generation of folks that aren't there anymore. You think about the guy that played Jeff Hardy, and the guy in like Pylum and some of those guys, Samuel Shaw, characters that aren't around as much anymore. It was sort of this weird transition period between like the first couple of years we came in and then what we're dealing with now. Where we kind of took a minute for us to get our characters in line. So
well, you're one of the busiest guys I know. I used to be in your Facebook friend. I always see the little map with the dotted line and the airplane traveling all over the damn place. Yeah. How do you even find time to role play and even role play at such a high level?
It's hard. I hate that I post a lot of my role plays on Fridays and Saturdays, like right before deadline.
Yeah, because we're not those kinds of people, or at least we try not to be.
Oh, I'm definitely that kind of person now.
You've changed. You're not the same man I knew.
No, I'm not the same man. I could never do 6 role plays in 1 week. Much less 12. No, yeah. I mean, I travel for work quite a bit for my job. Plus, I own a business that takes a lot of my time here in South Bend, and then on top of that, I have my wife and my daughter, and my daughter's 3 years old, so that's obviously a lot of responsibility, and I try not to ignore spending time with my family to get role plays done. So I've gotten better at just being quicker at coming up with ideas and writing. I've also realize that like sometimes I just need to like sit down and write and just go with whatever comes to me. And if it's not perfect, I just kind of make it work. I wish I could say I had like a really intricate plan for how I plan my role plays for the week, but a lot of times I'll have like the inkling of an idea and I'll just sit down and start writing. and hopefully it gets me somewhere. But there have been weeks where it's barely gotten me to 2 pages.
Yeah.
I'm not one to structure out a whole lot. I just kind of start writing and see where it takes me.
Yeah.
Um, what's worked for me is actually just like dedicating time to writing role plays. Like I literally have to get in my car and drive to Starbucks for 2 hours.
Oh, really?
Like that's when I'm going to do it because I'm too distracted when I'm at home.
Yeah.
And my work involves me being kind of available all the time. So if I don't get out of my house, like I will just be distracted by everything.
Yeah.
So my wife, Kristen, is very, generous in the fact that she's okay with me like getting in the car and driving over to Starbucks or over to, the local brewery and sitting down and writing a role play for 2 hours while I drink coffee or beer or something like that.
Yeah.
And I've gotten better when I do travel. I actually end up with more free time because I'm usually sitting in a hotel room, bored to death.
Yeah.
Between work meetings and stuff. So if I'm traveling by myself and have like an evening in the hotel, I'll sit there and write a role play, at the hotel desk, which is not inspiring, but sometimes what I have to do. So
it feels good to know that like I'm not the only one because I kind of feel. Obviously, I've found a level of success with it, so I don't feel like super weird. But like last week, like those Strowman role plays, the Buff Bagwell role plays, like there was no plan. I just sat down and I just started writing, and I was like, I know that this is what I want to start out with Strowman, and this is where I want to end up. And then hopefully, like 5,000 words later, I'll get there in an interesting way instead of a boring way. And that was my biggest fear in those measures of role plays is I felt like I was just boring people to death. But,
you bored Newt to sleep, and then he chose
Well, Newt messaged me, and he's like, I really like, your Strowman stuff. Not to give away what Newt said about my stuff, but he's like, I really thought your Strowman stuff was good. And in my head, I was like, damn, like I really thought that was like boring shit. And so I went back and read it and I was like, you know what, this actually isn't that bad for just like coming up with it on the fly. I know it's hard to be modest and humble and all that, but yeah, like I'm the same way. Like I just start writing and I'm like, okay, I want to get from point A to point B and I want to tell this emotional story.
And I'll tell you, like sometimes it's absolute shit. Like I'll sit down and start to get from point A to point B, and the whole role play is like Ken Shamrock pumping gas and talking about he's going to kick somebody's ass that week, and it's just not good. This is why I hate one role play matches because I usually need about half a role play to get decent.
Yeah.
And then by the time I get like usually I come up with an idea for my second role play while I'm writing the first, and I go, oh well, here's what I can do next, and my second or third role play is going to be a lot better than my first because it's like pulling fucking teeth. My first role play, sometimes I stare at it for hours.
Yeah.
And I spend all week writing it again, and I get it done Friday, and then I write a role play that's twice as long on Saturday. That just came to me really easily because I sort of worked through some of the kinks on the first role play. So
I don't know about you, but I'm a momentum RPer too. Like I'll go sometimes, like especially with the Danielson stuff last week, which I struggled with because it was a new character for me. I would write like a half a page and be like, oh, I'm gonna go vacuum now, or like, oh, I'm gonna go do laundry, or I'm gonna take the dog out, and then I'll come back and do like another half page, and I'm like, man, like I just can't get going, and then I'm like, oh, okay, this is a cool idea, let's take him and have him do this, and then next thing I know, I'm 6 pages in, and I'm like, okay, let's find a stopping point for here. Like I just get going, and it's a very snowball effect for writing.
Yeah, it's and I think about guys that like write novels and things like that, and like, we struggle to write 6 pages. Imagine if you're writing like a 400-page novel. How hard that must be,
Have you ever had thoughts or aspirations of doing something more though than writing these role plays?
It's definitely something. I studied screenwriting in college.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I did like a video production major, but I took one of my favorite classes was a night class at UNC Asheville where I went to school, and there was like 3 levels of it. I took all 3 of them, and it was a screenwriting class with a guy who had all these credits. He was like in his late 70s, early 80s. He's a retired screenwriter that lived in LA and wrote tons of movies and stuff and TV shows, and he had retired to Asheville and taught. This one class was the only class he taught at the university.
Yeah.
And so I did 3 different screenwriting classes, and I actually wrote and produced like 4 short films.
Oh, wow.
but when I was in college, they weren't good. But
Well, you were in college, of course not.
yeah, of course. But like I remember I got into screenwriting because I had started role playing when I was in middle school, and it made sense. I said, I like writing of characters and stories and scenes, and then so I said, well, screenplays are kind of the same thing, and so I got into writing screenplays, and I did that for most of my time in college. And part of why I got back into role playing in 2012 was that I kind of missed that,
Hmm.
but there wasn't really an avenue for me to just. I wasn't going to go try to like submit a script for a fucking TV show. Like
Yeah.
I had a career and a life, and so I said, well, I know this is something I can do. And so I took a lot of the story structure elements I learned from screenwriting and put that into like my characters and the way I write and things like that. I even toyed around with the idea of like even formatting my role plays to look like the same thing that scripts look like.
Yeah.
There's very specific formatting for scripts
Hmm.
that you can write it a certain way with like, where it says like exterior, and then, like there's just like formatting you use, and you can see some people in role playing that use some more sort of formatting, but I never really embraced that. I thought it was kind of gimmicky,
Yeah.
but yeah, I was a screenwriter for a while, and so there's always aspirations of like I would like to write a book or a novel or a short story or something. But I guess right now this is my creative avenue,
Yeah.
and then
Well, I got to
I
tell
don't
you,
know.
I did not think I would actually learn something on this podcast, considering how well you and I know each other. But here we
No,
are.
you
Here we
learn
are.
something.
I thought you were gonna say Kenny George was your partner in the class.
Yeah, right,
R.I.P.
right.
Big guy, Kenny George.
No, but Kenny George was in my class. I mean, he was in the same major as
Oh, he
me.
was in that class.
Yeah, he was in
That's
that
awesome.
class, and he
Yeah.
was in some of my other video production classes.
For
Um,
those of you who don't know, in the NCAA tournament one year, UNC Asheville made it, and Kenny George was like this 7'6", like just thick as a fucking shit brick house. Like he was just this huge dude, and Brett had classes with him, and I
yeah,
kind
he
of
was
marked
not a
out
good
when I
basketball
heard
player, and
he was
not
just huge.
he was just really big, and we had two guys over 7 feet tall, and neither of them were any good. And one of them got injured early on, and Kenny was like the quiet, goofy, taller guy, and he would sit. We'd have these lecture classes, and you'd have like 4 rows,
Yeah.
and he was so tall he couldn't fit in the row, and so he would just sit on the stairs, like off to the right side, across like 5 stairs, and he just looking like you hated being in the room because you could tell he was just like it was like Andre. It was like if Andre the Giant was in your fucking psych class,
Yeah. Now he like lost a leg or something, didn't he?
He did. No, yeah, he got like gangrene or something
Oh
from
yeah, that's right.
and they cut his leg off. Uh, yeah, so I only think he finished graduating college. I think he
Oh
left and he was gone. But he was a real quiet guy. I'm way off subject here,
no,
but
it's probably Samuel Shaw. It's fine.
yeah,
Well,
he's a
then
real
we'll take the world's worst transition then to
okay.
do America's favorite segment.
Uh,
And I know you have. I have been in conversations with you.
you've heard
You
him.
have so many penises in your anus that our group text might just be hemorrhoid chat. Like that's how many penises in your anus you have. The floor is yours. Tatanka Buffalo from Royal Rumble Super Nintendo is playing in the background. Give us your penis in your anus, Brett.
The penis of my anus, and I say this even though I've been guilty of it in the past. I don't like it when people join the Fed who have been members of the Fed before, but purposefully hide their identity and try to say, hey, I'm not somebody that's been in this Fed before, but it's so obvious that it's somebody that's been in the Fed before. Like they're trying to pull a fast one on us and say that, I'm a brand new person that stumbled in here and I know exactly how to role play for the EWA, but I've never been here before, if that makes sense.
It's
Um,
it's happened in the past, and you
yeah.
understand with guys like Ed because
Yeah.
if you know it's Ed, you're gonna treat him differently. So
Right.
Ed has to come in every time and pretend it's not Ed, even though after like a few role plays, we're like, oh, this is Ed. Like you could just tell, but yeah,
I don't like it, but there's a certain point in time where it reaches where the person is like pretending to be a different handler, and you're like, okay, like, is this person really a brand new person, or are they really committed to this out of character gimmick?
I
You know, so,
mean, we did the whole House of H thing, man.
I know, I know.
It's tough for it to be a penis in our anus when it's worked out. I mean, I guess House of H is different because we were like, hey, there's like this guy coming, and everybody thought that since Brian had handled House of H up to that point, that it was going to be Mr. Anderson. But we played it out beautifully. So, like, that's a different way of doing it. Obviously, in the past, Bryce with the suicide, that was probably handled rather well, especially if you can turn it and make it a masked or unknown character that winds up being the person. But when it's just, when you're just pretending to be someone else for the sake of
politics.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
You're trying to say I'm a new person, and that's just a personal thing. Like, I don't think it speaks to the quality of their writing, or anything like that. But you know, you can do that and be a great writer and kick my ass in most matches. But I just personally, I like to know who I'm dealing with on the other end. I want to be able to say, hey, this person is this person, and I know them. Not this person says they're this person, but I'm pretty sure they're not. You know.
Yeah. So. It's tough. I know. In the past, it made more sense because the EWA was a little more hostile than it used to be.
Yeah.
So
it's not deal with now.
Yeah, you didn't want people to know who you were. Especially, you know, if people were all pissed off at Steve, it made sense for Steve to join as somebody else and not people not know it was him. And then everybody kind of came to accept Steve. So you could just.
I think we're due for a Steve return, aren't we?
Who knows? He could be out there, man.
He could be. Yeah.
He could be out there. He's going to join up as Kenny George next. You never know. You have had many accolades here. I believe you're one of the few Grand Slam champions. You have every type of victory to your credit. I believe you've won King of the Ring as well, right?
Never won King of the Ring.
Okay. So I guess it's just John and I then in the Fed who have won it all. Okay. Regardless, though, but like I said, you
champion. When you were
like I said, you have many high accolades to your name. I don't want to put you on the spot and make you choose just one, but what would you say is, or maybe your top 2 or 3, your best and most favorite accolades from the EWA in your time here?
I'm gonna reminisce a little bit. I am proud of the fact that I am still the record holder for the longest national title reign.
Close.
Close. People have gotten close, but I'm still the holder. So, you there?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm really proud of that reign. And then Super Brawl 2012, the first Super Brawl. You know I feel like I never wrote or worked so hard to win something. I think the only time I've worked that hard is for the most recent Super Brawl. But that first Super Brawl that you and me and Fuzz and Cleve were in and Jazz, like, that was, I think, like, what convinced me that this was a game that I wanted to play for a long time. So I was really proud of that. And that was a year-long story that I told. And when I joined, I didn't even know Super Brawl was a thing. And to then kind of get to that point was really special. So,
what would you say is your biggest regret in the EWA?
I mentioned turning Val Venus heel in 2013. I think it was like the right thing to do, but I don't think I handled it as well as I could have. So I kind of regret that heel run for a bit. I think that took away some. I almost wish I had just like put Val Venus on the shelf for 6 months and then come back to it instead of trying to make something work that didn't work. A little context on that. I had turned Val Venus heel sort of to kind of freshen up the character, and then was approached by Bryce, who was the champion at the time, who said he needed to take a break and wanted to just like forfeit the title. And so he forfeited the title by having me cash in my Civil War contract and just like winning the title off of him. So like, not only did I turn my character heel and then take the title sort of almost without deserving it, like, if that makes sense, like, I didn't really have to beat him. I just felt like I had bad mojo after that. Like, I just couldn't make it work. And then the other regret I have would say just, I don't know, just taking a little bit too much time off in the last couple of years before I came back with Ken Shamrock. I think like I could have, I had some stories to tell, but I just didn't, I didn't have to find a way to have time to do it. So Yeah,
What about that year that we ran it back with the Vegas connection?
that was fun. I really enjoyed that too. I thought that was a really good year, a fun time. I feel like we got as much out of the Vegas connection as we could have.
I think that was like the last like
That was the last
heavy
drop.
drama time, like in the EWA. And that was a
Yeah,
couple, quite. It was like 5 or 6 years ago, but it was just
or
like these motherfuckers think they're gonna come in and do what they did to you. Like it was just like everyone was against us. Like we fucking bathed in it, man. Like we were like, yeah, like we're gonna beat everyone's ass. Like we got the
I think
gang
it
back
just
together.
I think it just moved to South Bend at that time. So I
Yeah.
lived in the same town as Fuzz at the time, and we were like had drank a couple beers and just said, we're gonna fucking win Super Bowl.
Yeah. Yeah, and then everybody was just like, "Let's all try our hardest to beat these dudes." And then of course we
Yeah,
didn't win or whatever.
it
But I
was
was
in
just,
the feedback thread, you know.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
we were like, we said in like our private chat, I was like, I kind of hope we don't win because it might like literally spark a riot if we win the Super Brawl this year.
then
Like people,
we burned Cody Rhodes'
we
house
burned
down.
Cody Rhodes' house down. Yeah, and then I used that in my Civil War role plays to win Civil War that year. So.
Yeah.
I've won
Um,
Civil War twice, had one elimination in both of them, so I'm not real good at throwing people out, but I throw out the one that matters, I guess, in my victories.
there you go. Yeah.
What?
Um,
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think one thing I that gets missed that people maybe don't remember is like you and I had like a hell of a run as tag champs with
Yeah,
Cody Rhodes and
yeah,
Venus.
that was
Like that was I think some of the best storytelling I ever did with Val Venus, and it was sort of a redemption arc because that's how I brought him back from being a heel, was like teaming up with Cody as a babyface. That was a lot of fun. I remember that.
yeah,
So
that was a good run, and we beat some high quality competition. There were a couple I remember us winning, and I'm like, hey, look, that's pretty big deal that we're
yeah,
picking up these
absolutely.
dubs. That was probably the last. Yeah, that was a good time. Last thing I remember about Val's run. So, to kind of bring it all together here as we come up on the close of this podcast, what does the EWA as a whole mean to you?
You know, it's I value my time with my family and my job. I mean I'm a guy that works 60 plus hours a week, and my wife and I own and run the business together. So I work full time with my wife. So I'm very like my life is very much, centered around that and the community that I build. For those that don't know, I my wife and I own a running shoe store in South Bend, Indiana. And so
And for
that
those of you who
community,
don't know, running is when you move faster than walking, which I think a lot of people in the EWA have no idea what running
I don't
is.
know what that is. I don't know. Josh is a runner. He's told me he's ready to do it. So,
Oh, okay.
no. So, but that type of business is very community oriented because the running community is usually pretty close knit in most
Yeah.
cities, and you get to know people on a pretty personal level when you sell them shoes and help them train for races and marathons and things like that. So the community, I treasure and value community quite a bit, and so, but I can't only do that. Like I can't only work, and EWA is sort of my escape. It allows me to kind of interact with folks like you and Cleve and some of the people that I consider really close friends. That you guys just don't give a shit about what I did at work that day, and you help me try something and kind of step outside of my comfort zone to write weird stories about 55-year-old pro wrestlers and fight undead Frankenstein zombies like PCO and shit like that. So I think what it is I enjoy interacting with people, and I enjoy telling stories, and I enjoy working with people. And so really this is my escape. EWA is like my hobby.
Yeah.
I don't have much hobby. Like my only other hobby is running, and that's what I do for a living. So uh, so yeah, it's my big hobby, and it's kind of my escape from the everyday work. So
And I think it helps too that the EWA is just a nice place, and the people there are really cool. And I probably go there way more throughout the day than I should, but it's just kind of fun to see how people are reacting to stuff and the moving pieces and parts as we go forward together, and the stories we get to tell together. Like we tell stories on our own, but it's more fun to work with someone and tell these dynamic, different stories. So
yeah, it really is.
I agree with you. Well, Brett, I appreciate you coming on. It's been a long time since podcast number 1, probably about 5 or 6 years from now, or ago. So, let's do this again in another 5 or 6 years. I think it was around this time, about 5 years ago or 6 years ago, that the EWA podcast got off the ground. So, and now here we are chatting over video.
Yeah.
About to do it again.
Happy we can do it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Any last words for the EWA faithful?
I just look forward to another fun year, and I know Ken Shamrock just lost the title, but I'm not going anywhere. And as you might see, I just joined up as a second character, so I'm going to try to keep up with some of you guys that handle multiple characters and tell some stories. I'm also first time I've ever joined as a wrestler in their 20s. So
oh, wow.
I think this is interesting, trying to it'll really show my age if I'm trying to like use that 20-year-old slang.
He takes a hit off his jewel pod. What are you talking about? You go down to Starbucks and shit. You're fine, and craft beers. Like you're fine.
If Brian Pillman Jr. is like really into hitting his vape pen, then,
Well, Brett, thank you for coming on. Sorry about the loss over the weekend, but I know you'll bounce back and you'll have more and better stories to tell. This has been fun. Looking forward to going forward this year and working with you and others in the future. So, Brett, thank you for coming on. Thank you all for watching and listening. This has been a presentation of the EWA. Have a good one.